some pointing to presence, since I don't always do that anymore. I have so many videos on that, just so you know. In case you're looking for that, you don't have to look very far. If you go to my Killaby Center, Scott Killaby, that is, YouTube channel, and search for, you don't even have to search, go back to the old videos, 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12 is when I did most of the videos for seeking, just pointing to awareness, because I was fresh out of the seeking, so that was really important. See, just like it's important for certain people now who are in that business of seeking awakening or looking for their true nature, discovering their true nature. That was really important. Once it's recognized, it doesn't, obviously it's not as important. So I'm talking about other things that are relevant these days. And that has to do, and that obviously connects with the awareness recognition, because I've been talking about it that way, that embodiment actually allows you to abide more easily. So let me talk about that, and then we'll do some pointing, some good old pointing. I know many of you are probably looking for those kinds of pointers that make it clear and obvious what your true nature is here in the present moment. And I keep saying continue in that. Continue in that, because those kinds of pointers and teachings were incredibly helpful for me, and they've been helpful for so many people. But all that I'm saying is, if consider inquiry, somatic-based inquiry, as a way to stabilize and abide as that. Just briefly, I was saying this yesterday, but whatever pockets of energy or contraction or pain that we hold around, they hold in our body, and we hold it around for a while, years even, that is making it difficult to abide as awareness, even if you don't realize it. So that energy, because it's more than just a sensation, it has thoughts in it. And wherever there are thoughts like that connected to sensation or emotion, there's Velcro, the Velcro effect, the mind-body connection, which means that the thoughts that are unconsciously tucked into your contraction or your pain are actually involving you in that, or creating that, I got it, I lost it. Because so much of the triggers come from that area where the contraction is, but there's also repression there. Most likely there's repression of emotion and thought there, and old trauma. So that is already creating an experience that's not stable here. It's not abiding effortlessly. The body keeps the score. So if you notice non-abiding, it's not just your mind, it's your body also. And even when your mind is quiet, here's a good key. You would think that when the mind is quiet, it would be like a sense of nowhere to go, already complete as I am, unless your body's contracted. So can you, if you don't know what the culprit is, you'll have difficulty resolving this part of the issue. If you think that that sensation is always going to be here, or if you're not doing any discovery on that particular sensation, it's creating the oscillation. So how do I know this? I know this because doing thousands of sessions one-on-one with people, and they start with energy stuck somewhere. And by mining that energy and doing inquiry on that, if that dissolves, the abiding is natural. And they even will say that. It's like, oh, it's just easier to recognize presence. So I'm going to do some pointing, but keep in mind that somatic-based inquiry was designed to help you abide as awareness. And might I say, very stably, because when you dissolve a contraction, that's a stable abiding. It's not like that contraction is going to take you out again. It won't. If it's thoroughly done, the contractions dissolve, and that's a kind of a permanent or irrevocable shift to awareness. Again, because you've dissolved the culprit. if you don't dissolve contractions, just hear me out, one issue on this more, because this is important information, I think, for people to take back to their meditation mat or their wherever you go to do your practice. Even with a quiet mind, a body that is contracted makes the experience restless, uncomfortable, painful, squirmy, and anxious sometimes. So that makes it hard to just sit and be if you've got a body that feels like that. So a lot of people are also engaging in yoga and different forms of physical movement to deal with that, which is fine. But these sensations in your body that make you want to go do the yoga and the other things, the physical things, which many of them are helpful, that sensation is connected to thoughts. So hear me out. So when you try to do something physical, you can only go so far with it because it's partly mental, psychological, but those thoughts are unconscious and connected to the sensation. So you could see how you might think, oh, this is something for inquiry if I go work out, if I run, and it can help, but it doesn't go to the root of the issue if there are thoughts connected to that. So like a broken record, every day I'll come on and say that because every day there'll be someone who hears it for the first time. And they're like, oh yeah, of course, that's the missing piece in my practice. I'm not able to abide is that my body is keeping the score in the past. Once you see that, you have a way in. All right. I had to get that out of the way because that's my big footnote on all pointings to awareness, as you can probably tell, is that there's a huge footnote on this awareness stuff, which is that some stuff is unconscious. It requires us to pull it up, or else it continues to wreak havoc. But once you put that footnote in your experience and knowing that I'm not encouraging bypassing of any kind when I do this pointing, or I'm not encouraging a lack of embodiment, I'm saying include that in your practice. So here we go. Here's the thing I have to say first. Because often it's a deficiency story trying to become enlightened. And that is not going to work. So if you hear me talk about the deficiency story in the way that it sabotages enlightenment the same way. It's no different. So any pointing ought to include talk on this. A deficiency story cannot recognize awareness, wake up, embody the awareness, transcend anything. It cannot do any of those things. Its very nature is to feel limited and deficient and lacking and separate. So if you're coming to the Enlightenment teaching still believing a deficiency story, good luck. And even if the deficiency story hears pointers, yeah, there can be some recognition that I'm not that story in the moment, kind of a glimpse. But if your habit is to contract back into deficiency, then even the experience of the presence may not be stabilized in your experience because of that. Because the habit is to think of myself as not good enough or unlovable. There's no room in that for a recognition of non-separation. So before we do any pointing, can we do a little deconstructing of this self that comes here today, wanting to recognize presence, that self? So look at, before I say this, because there may be some people who still think I'm not, like may not hear me still. When you have it, when your deficiency story is running your show, when you identify with it, you get into relationships, that those relationships will mirror back and confirm that you're deficient. That's how the self-sabotage happens, is the deficiency story is a self-sabotaging mechanism because it has to confirm itself as deficient in order to survive. So it'll do that in relationship. This is why if you have a lot of failed relationships, part of the problem could be you believe in a deficiency story and or the other person does. Work. If you're having struggling at work, look at the areas in which there's a sabotage. So if a person who feels not good enough is what goes to work, that person functioning of mind and body will look to things at work to confirm that it's deficient. And this is an unfortunate thing because consciously we don't want this. But on an unconscious level, the deficiency story wants to survive. It's all about survival here on Earth, as you know. So the deficiency story wants to survive. So, and the way that it does that is by interpreting, by there being a continuous interpretation that I am this deficiency story. So that happens in relationship. It can also happen when you pick up a methodology. If you believe that you'll never wake up, or if you believe very self-limiting beliefs, those beliefs could be doing the inquiry. That programming could be doing inquiry, in which case inquiry is not going to be very successful because the deficiency story seeks to confirm itself. So if it can pick up a methodology and which proves that you're never going to get it, then that's perfect proof for the deficiency story, even if consciously you don't want that. This is the explanation for you, for your life, as to why you may have job and career issues that don't take off, or relationships that don't sustain themselves. It could be a sabotage. And the same sabotage could be happening when you hear non-dual pointers. So if the deficiency program hears them, it only knows lack and deficiency. So it can't stretch beyond that to recognize what's being pointed to. So my point is, let's do a little bit of work on the deficiency story. Look at what your mind perceives as the awakening that you're looking for. In the ego consciousness, it's always interpreting it as something that's going to happen, but maybe you've never even visualized it. Visualize what you think is going to happen in words or pictures. This thing called awakening or presence, when you recognize it fully, do you still have a mental program around that it's going to happen in the future? Even if, as you're told by the teachers, that you can't become awakened by seeking future, because that mind is the ego. So seeking solidifies the ego. Even if you hear that, that doesn't mean that the deficiency story has been seen through by hearing that. So instead, we do a little bit more skillful deconstruction. If you look at the thing that you're chasing, just paint it a certain way, like whatever it is, I don't have it, that kind of thing. It's that. And then do a boomerang. So what does this enlightenment, this awakening thing that you're seeking, what does that mirror back about you that you haven't found it? What does that mean about you? I'm not there yet. I'm not enough. I'm not complete. I'm unlovable. Something like that. So a part of your work to do is inquiry on that story. So let's say it's not good enough. I'll do a little bit of experiential work with you. This will be one of the only times that I do it here on YouTube, when I'm talking to those folks who are seeking, because I know this is helpful. So whatever the deficiency story is, reverse that right now. So again, if there's the enlightenment is pushed off into the future in your consciousness, like you're coming to it, then what does that mirror back? Put a name to the person here who hasn't found that yet. I'm just going to go with something like, I'm not there yet, but maybe some other story. Reverse that. So I'm already here. I'm already there, here. Which, for a moment, let's just be obvious. Let's be, the elephant in the room is that we are already here. There's no other place to be. This is it. Presence is it. There's no place to go. Whatever you're seeking, this is it. But the mind, hear how the mind says otherwise. So as you reverse it, whatever it is, watch. Just observe from awareness. So I'm already here. I'm already arrived. I've already arrived. Mind says no. See, it's a story happening here. It's a story that you haven't arrived, that you haven't awakened. The story is the thing. And I'm asking you to witness. So when you reverse it, you say, I'm already here. You should see objections coming up. Let each one just be. Let the mind object. Let it tell its story that you're not already here, which of course you are. Stay with the thoughts one at a time. When you see a thought, words, picture, just let it be and watch it. If you can, watch it dissolve. See it fall away, because in the falling away, there can be a recognition of what's already here. Awake, presence, whatever. Each thought falls into that, so to speak. So watching the falling away of each thought is a pointer back to rest or presence. It points you back to recognize you're not the thoughts, you're what's here. Awake to them. So keep reversing that. I'm already here, or I'm perfect as I am. If the story is not good enough, reverse it that way. I'm perfect as I am. And then just watch the thoughts. This is the programming that keeps you seeking. This is it right here. The deep-seated sense that there's something wrong with you is the seeker. So you're just watching the seeker. So there's no seeker there. There's just this series of thoughts. So watch them from awareness. And if you can notice the space between thoughts, there's really no seeker here. In the space between thoughts, maybe open your eyes a bit and look without thought for a moment and notice that there's no evidence of a story or a seeker or anyone who's not here yet or anything. Just a moment of that recognition. And then go back to, because that's just a glimpse, go back to looking at what you really believe, which is the deficiency story. So reverse it. I'll sit with you for a while as you just watch that. Because if not, that story is going to be listening to the pointers later. And frustration will possibly ensue if you don't witness this first. Repeat. Keep going until it's quiet. Even if you have to turn the video off, don't go into this next portion of the video until this deficiency story is somewhat quiet here. So continuing to reverse, I'm already here, already awakened. There's no I to be awakened, so that's a false thing. It's a thorn to remove a thorn now. So the thorn that we're removing is this belief that I'm a deficient self. That's the thorn we're removing. And the reverse inquiry is the thorn that removes it. So if the belief is I'm not good enough, the thorn to remove it is I'm perfect as I am. If the thorn to remove is I'm not there yet, the story I'm already there is a thorn to remove that. Neither entity exists. They're both thoughts. Just watching the thoughts that come up in response to the inquiry now. Just keep watching, because just empty out this sense of a self as you watch, because as you do, more and more of the experience of presence shows up. If you notice that, if you give yourself enough space to really be with everything, that presence starts to dawn on you more and more as the story gets lighter. But you have to stay with it for a while. So I'm already here. Stay with this inquiry, because if this self gets emptied out, what's left is presence. Sometimes there's no other pointing necessary. It's just this deficiency story was running the show and you didn't see it. So stick with it. I'm already here, already awake. Now, even if you have to turn the video off to just continue looking, join me in this next segment only when that deficiency story is pretty quiet. So if it's still pretty active, I would just stop the video and continue watching that. Continue in reverse inquiry for a bit. Because we kind of want that to settle down a bit before we go into this. Because again, if the deficiency story you hear is the pointers, then it'll always put it out in time. It'll always make you feel like you're not there yet. So you want to listen from presence more. Listen to this from what's already here listening. Like what's here listening is not a story. Because you can hear my voice immediately. Before you even put it into your story, you hear the sounds immediately appearing to awareness. See? So let things be much more direct now. Instead of filtering everything through the mind, hear and experience everything appearing to awareness. So if we point to awareness, we could use words like that which doesn't move. There's an aspect of experience that isn't moving, isn't coming and going. And that aspect is really the only quality to it is awakeness. You could say being, but to be awake to what's moving. So just rest here as that awake space. And let's first explore that awake space a bit. If your mind is quieter now, maybe even do some breath, watching breath for a moment to let the mind quiet even more. Just follow breath down into the diaphragm a few times, watching it come in and out. And that just again helps the mind get a little quieter. So as that quietness starts to show up, recognize being aware. So that which is here and awake to what's arising, but itself isn't moving, it's not arising. As you look at thoughts that come up about future, especially ones that seem to pull you or seduce you into seeking, like that there's something that's like as if this isn't it, and the mind says it's going to be something else, give that no energy. So just notice it. Whatever the mind says that still needs to happen, give it no energy, which just means to notice it directly and stay with it. When you make these thoughts conscious, they kind of slow down and you don't identify with them in that moment by noticing them. You can see them for what they are. But in not noticing them, they can easily kind of pull you, seduce you back into the time-bound game of seeking. Instead, stand here as awareness, and no matter what the content of the thought about the future, just notice it and let it be. And then, and noticing it and letting it fall away, just return back to what's already awake. Come back to rest, as the title suggests. Which you're not coming back to anything. You're just sort of re-recognizing in a way. Like you notice a thought, or thoughts, in that moment, something is arising to awareness. And then when that thought falls, for a moment, nothing is arising to awareness. And yet there's still awareness, there's still being here without the mind. And then mind arises again, and you notice that. See? But in noticing, you don't get taken over by that. You don't think that you are that. It's something that you're looking at, whatever it is. It's something that you're experiencing, you awareness. So what is here that's already awake? What awakeness is already here? There's your context. It's not something that you're seeking in the future. It's a matter of recognizing that you're literally already present. The only thing that would be happening would be some clouds in the sky of awareness seeming to obscure the recognition. Because the sky is already here. The awakeness is always already here. So really just be interested in what clouds, what beliefs, programs, thoughts are right there. Sometimes it's more somatic. So if you're dealing with something somatic where your body feels contracted or whatnot, then that's going to take up your attention. And I was talking about how that makes it difficult to abide. That, I would say, somatic-based self-inquiry. That's beyond the scope of what we're doing. Listen to this, though. So if you've been to teachings or talks in which you had a somatic thing arising for you, but the method or the teaching didn't meet that, we meet that here, but we do that through inquiry. So we do have an answer for you with regard to the body. If you have a body thing going on right now, it's just beyond the scope of what I'm doing right now. That's KI. To dig deep into that and unearth the identifications that make that contracted. But for now, just let that be. If you don't know how to do that inquiry, rest and just let the sensation be as it is. You may do a little bit of mining. So just feeling into the sensation. What does it mean about me? And watch. Repeat that. What does that sensation mean about me? Because pulling out those thoughts and witnessing them could help the contraction sort of dissolve or become more porous, in which case it's not affecting the resting as awareness as much. So mining, continuing with that, if needed. So those who are mining, just continue with that. What does this mean about me? Until the sensation doesn't pull your attention as much. As long as it's pulling your attention, it's going to be difficult to focus on these pointers. So continue mining. But if you can just let that sensation be as it is, come back to the recognition of what's already at rest. So what's already at rest is like a still pond. You want to jump off this metaphor, just use it and then throw it away. But it's like the still pond, and so it's not moving. And so therefore it's stable. See, because it's not in the realm of things that are coming and going. This knowing of presence, it's always stably here. So this is why stability shows up for people in their experience as they wake up from the story in the mind. But for now, even if you haven't seen through that story, that's still there, come down and find that which is not moving, the still pond aspect of your experience. Space, stillness, presence. And then within and through that, notice the movements. So you'd have to really anchor to the stillness to even notice movement. If you're identifying with the movements, with the thoughts, the stillness will feel out of reach. And this practice won't be as helpful. So really take a moment and anchor to that recognition of what's not moving, what's already here and present. And then from that, just listening and watching for movement, but only to do nothing with it. I'm inviting you to do nothing with anything that moves, other than just noticing it. So 1,000 thoughts could come through, all welcomed, but what is it that's not moving here? So just let those thoughts come through. See, just noticing how they come through. It's like they're not there, and then suddenly something is there, and you notice it, and then at some point it's gone. And that's the nature of every thought like that. You don't have to do anything other than rest as what's already here and notice. Unless you're doing somatic work right now, stay with me on this. If your body is really pulling you in that direction, you may want to just do inquiry, right? That might be the more appropriate. But if you could just put that aside for a moment and just rest as what's already awake here. So, like the pond, where the ripples on the surface don't disturb the pond. So just imagine that for a moment as an image. A still pond, which represents what you are. And this right on the surface, there's these disturbances. We'll just call them waves, ripples. But the pond is undisturbed by that. So all the ripples can just be as they are, do whatever they want. And still the pond is not disturbed. So find that, throw that away now. Throw that metaphor out the window. Come back to direct experience. What here is like the pond? It's not going to be water. It's going to be the experience of something here that's not moving or changing, that's still quiet, spacious. Feeling that as your entire being, as if you are that still, quiet, unmoving presence. Not that it's something that you notice, that it is what you are. And then you don't have to do anything else, because once you recognize that that's what you are, everything is coming and going to you or within you now. So instead of identifying with them, these things, instead of just going back into thinking, you're going to notice thoughts coming through. And that's all. Just notice and do nothing. So whether one wakes up from here or whether the awakening happens from here has to do with, I think, partly, how radical are you going to be with this? So no matter what your mind produces in the way of words or picture, no matter how seductive it may seem, Can you do nothing other than just notice it, letting it come and go? And that's for every single thought, especially the most profound ones. So in this direct experience, your profound pointers, they're not gonna, don't hang on to them. Even the pointers come and go like that. So here, resting as this awareness, there's nothing to hold on to. Just noticing everything coming and going. So that which doesn't move, that which is already at rest, can't be sought in time. Time is thought. So time arises and falls within that. Past, future, time. Those would just be other thoughts that you're noticing. They're not given special weight. Thoughts about time are allowed to come and go, just like thoughts about that are pointers, or thoughts within the deficiency story. They're all in the realm of thoughts you just notice and allow without grabbing onto anything. Here, notice the tendency to want to know, that movement of knowing, understanding, landing on a concept. If you can notice your tendency to do that, and whenever you see you've landed somewhere and you're thinking something, can you turn towards it and just notice it again? See that that's not a place to land, that's simply another thought. That for a moment there was identification with it, but as you notice it again, what's noticing is the awareness. So even that thought, whatever it is, begins to fall. So as you're resting here, can you not land anywhere? Is another way of saying notice everything. So in a sense, all of your knowledge just comes and goes, but we're not following any of it. We're not believing it, we're just noticing it for the purpose of recognizing what is not thought. If I'm not those thoughts that I'm noticing, then what am I? If another thought comes up, notice that. Here, whether you hear this in a way that truly brings about the recognition of presence, I think a lot of it has to do with where are you landing. So maybe you've already just landed and you're thinking about something now, and that's fine. Don't have to make that into a big deal. But do you notice that it's happening? Do you notice that you've got a concept there that you landed on and now you're ruminating on that? Can you turn towards it and not land there? Just let that one be seen. Let it go like the rest. So if you can stand here like this, look at me for a second, where you're the unmoving space, and everything that's moving, you just notice it. And you get a sense of how you can't grab onto it. Like there's nothing there really other than just some data coming through, pictures, words. But standing as awareness and not grabbing on to anything that you notice, like a free fall. Stand as that. Even your most precious insight or pointer don't land. Notice. Even your most painful thought about yourself, or the truest thought that feels true about yourself, treat it like the rest of the thoughts. Just noticing it. If it's getting quieter, just look me in the eyes for a moment. The same awareness that's there is here. And speaking and listening from that now. All your life you've been identifying with those things moving in your mind, those thoughts. But now if you can steadily rest as what's awake here, looking into my eyes. This is what you are. It's not a thought. Feel that felt sense of being this. Without a name for it. Naming it really won't help you here. That's the world of the known. When you're communicating it or teaching it, you can call it something. But for now, recognize that none of the names that you might have for this are necessary to do anything other than notice them. Just notice. And stand as what's already awake. The direct experience of that. The experience of being here now, awake to reality now. Not a thought. If your mind says, is this oneness or do I sense the non-dual? Just observe that thought. You don't really have to follow it, just let it be. As you're living more and more in this, where you recognize the presence that's here, begin another exploration in the present moment where you look at things without labeling what they are. So, for example, I'm looking at a hand, but I'm not calling it that. And then I'm not calling this space. So, as the hand meets the table, I'm not calling the table the table. I'm just looking at how everything is seamless. There's not even two hands, just looking. There's no line that divides these, except for in thinking. So just scanning reality in the present moment, looking at the seamlessness of everything. Everything bleeds into everything else. There are no lines of division, except if we think them in. But if we're resting without thought, we're not thinking those labels in to reality. So we get to see reality as it really is. Labelless, seamless, everything inseparable. Spend a good deal of time here, exploring that, the seamlessness of life, because you've probably been in the consciousness that reifies everything, makes everything into a thing, a separate thing. That's what the ego activity is. So spending time where you're not making things into things, a new kind of consciousness where you're not labeling anything, and you're noticing how, without labeling, you don't know what anything is. And as you start to explore that more, you don't know that anything is divided off from anything else without thinking. Just like how the floor of a forest meets the root of a tree, or the trunk of a tree, and the trunk goes into branches, and the branches meet the sky. You see all of that seeming seamlessly. You're not even labeling tree. See that? As you move into apparent objects, you're not calling them anything. At first, the mind won't think anything of this. This gives the mind nothing. So you have to watch for the mind that says, so what? And just stick to this investigation instead. Because the mind, so to speak, the mind wants to go back to object making. That's where it thrives, in the making of objects. So this doesn't give it anything when you're just seamlessly exploring things without calling them anything. So it gives you nothing for the mind. So watch for the mind that might want to come back and try to know and name, and let that happen. Even the thought of something being named seamlessly arises out of the space. It's all the awareness, and then it falls back in. And then you just continue in the exploration here. So there'll be moments where you just have short moments throughout the day where you're here, awake and aware directly, and you can explore in this way. But when you get those moments, do that exploration. See reality seamlessly. That helps to break down the sense of separation and everything, just seamlessly exploring how one thing bleeds into another. Yeah, watch for the mind that says this is not a big deal, or so what, or this isn't it. Because it's a really clever what it does. It's like this is it, but the expiration is just happening here, and the mind comes in and will say, no, this isn't it, and it'll start producing thoughts. See that? Going back into the known. Just notice that. Watch for the mind that says this isn't it, because that's one of the thoughts that comes up right there. It tries to reify a self in that moment, like you haven't, you're not seeing it. And it tries to make you into an object when it says, this isn't it, or you haven't seen it yet. Watch that thought, because that thought is not a self. It's just this thought that's coming through that makes it seem like there's a self here who doesn't get it. You have to watch that one, and then come back to the direct experience. Yeah, sit with that for a while.